2 seconds here. All right, everyone, welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name is Jared Mello. Today, very special guest, my freshman year of high school English teacher that I have not seen since the year 2000. I've just aged us both. But how are you today, Mr. J. Black?
It is wonderful to be here, Jared. And I just want to say this to anybody that follows you. I take no blame or credit for any misspellings in any post that he does. I blame all the other teachers. I am not involved with that. But I'm so proud of how far you've gone. This is amazing, this whole brand that you've built for yourself. This is spectacular. Good for you, man.
I appreciate it. And I wasn't expecting it to go in this direction, but sometimes you just got to go with the flow, you know?
Absolutely.
And you got to go with the direction that the momentum is taking you.
You go with the direction the momentum takes you, and I think if you can enjoy it along the way, which I think you are, that's where you find joy in life. So Absolutely. Good for you, my friend.
So I want to hear about how you transitioned from being an English teacher that on the last day of school wears shorts running in the door
yeah.
to all of a sudden you do a career shift and then you say, I want to be a stand-up comedian.
Well, you know, it's something that I wanted to do my entire life was stand up. And it was one of those things. I think you live in New Jersey, so you get it into your head. This is an impossibility. There's no possible. I mean, I have to live in Los Angeles or New York. Nobody is coming to Medford, New Jersey to discover stand-ups. And what happened was I met a girl who was a substitute teacher, I believe, when you were still there at Shawnee. Her name was Christina Panarella. You might know her father, Mr. Panarella, who was Mike Panarella, was a history teacher at Shawnee. I started dating her and I wanted to impress her. So I used that as sort of the jumping off point to do my first open mic. And in all honesty, it was just going to be like building birdhouses on the weekend for me. It was just, my plan was be an English teacher, make some extra dollars, telling dick. Can I curse?
Is this of course, thing? By all means, curse
telling
away.
Dick jokes on the weekends. That was my whole plan. And it just so happened I kind of caught fire in the college market, and I started making more money doing stand-up than I was teaching, which doesn't say much about stand-up as much as it does we should pay teachers more. Pay teachers more, everybody.
And totally with you there. Totally with you there.
And I said to my wife, like, hey, look, I'm making more money. What should I do? And she was like, well, it's not like we have kids. Go for it. So I went for it. I handed in my resignation. And then literally 2 weeks later, she was pregnant. So I always look at, you want to talk about sliding doors. Had it gone just a little bit different in the timing, I'd still be teaching, and I wouldn't have made the leap. But every year when I make the money that I would have made teaching, doing stand-up, I throw a little party for myself. And sometimes that party is in March, and sometimes it's in late December. But so far, I've been able to match the money that I would have made. So it's
I'll tell you what. Of all the professions out there, musicians, podcasters, whatever, I think it takes the most amount of balls to go up there on a stage and try to make people laugh, because it's so reaction dependent. Yeah. Like, you're up there, and if you don't get the laughs, man, you're bombing. And it's Absolutely. Like, it's terrifying.
And I started in Philly, so it's not only is it the people are going to dislike you, they might throw things at you. Many of them come armed, So, what has to happen, in all honesty, you want to talk about, finding yourself through doing something difficult. You have to get to the point where you've failed so many times in front of people, sort of the dead-eyed stare of the incomprehending, like, I don't like what you're doing at all. You have to have that happen so many times that a callus kind of grows over the part of you that is worried about that. And it's this amazing thing happens. The psychology of an audience is such that the second you stop needing them, that's when they want to like you. Right. And I tell young comics all the time, you'll start killing the second you stop needing to kill. And it's this thing of like, nobody wants to, comedy as an audience member. I don't know if you've been to live comedy, but if you go to a live comedy show, you have a lot of power over that comedian, especially the young guys coming out. You can see the sweat, and they're sort of like, they're desperate, like, please love me, uh, and that power is something that as an audience member you don't want to have because it's too much, right?
Right.
It's like if you don't laugh, and you can see it sometimes when a comic is bombing, the sort of desperate, like I'm trying to laugh to make you feel better, like, and you can just see the comic dying. Audiences don't want that. What they want is a comic who doesn't need them, and they can relax. And it just, when I first started, it said the conventional wisdom was it takes about 10 years to get to the point where you're good at this. And I was like, 10 years, I'm so good, it'll take me 5. No, it takes 10 years. And it's not about the comedy, it's about the ability to not worry about the audience as much.
I could see that. That's a good suggestion for any of the up and coming comics out there.
Yeah.
I've thought about throwing my hat in it a little bit, but I haven't taken the plunge to do that yet.
Do it. Just go to an open mic, Jared. I'm telling you, it is not, it looks, it's way harder in your mind than it is in reality. Once you get up there and the sort of give and take of the audience, it's my favorite thing to do still. I've been doing this full time professionally for 17 years, and I've been doing it since 2002, so 23 years total. And I still love every second of being on stage. It's like pizza or sex. Even when it's bad, it's good.
I think I got enough trauma and some craziness to do pretty well. I got enough interesting things that have happened to me where it might make it fun and interesting. So
Absolutely. Yeah, just tell your story and see what people make of it. For me, comedy's always been sort of the lingua franca, which is, I have ideas in my head and I don't know how good the ideas are, but if I can make somebody else laugh, at the very least, I know that I'm connecting with them in such a way that they understood what I meant at the very least.
absolutely. So two things here. Who are your comedic inspirations? Because usually there's people that you might try to mold yourself after
Sure.
in the beginning, but who are your role models?
Well, my favorite comic of all time is Chris Rock, and he had a special in 1996 called "Bring the Pain."
Mm.
And if you ever saw the first episode of The Office, or maybe it was the second episode, Diversity Day, he's quoting Chris Rock in Diversity Day. But I saw that when I was a junior in college, and it sort of set it imprinted on me like a baby bird seeing a mother for the first time. Like this. That's what comedy is. That's the one where he drops the mic at the very end. And comics have what they're trying to say versus them trying to be funny. Like they're trying to get a message across, or they're trying to be funny. Sometimes George Carlin had a message that was so great that the comedy sort of suffered. And sometimes you see a comic just doing funny stuff with no message. I thought Chris Rock, especially in that special, kind of sat at the very, at the X of those two graphs. And I just loved him. The only bad part about that is I do think that I've never seen a comic kill as hard as Chris Rock in that special. So in my brain, that's what killing is
Mm.
doing what Chris Rock did in that special. So that means in my life, I have never killed because no one could achieve what he achieved in that. But I also loved Richard Jenny growing up. I loved Jerry Seinfeld. I loved Sam Kinison. There's two schools of thought, either Kinison or Dice. And of the two, I thought, of the two shock comics at the time, I always thought Kinison was had more to say. Big fan of Dennis Miller before he got hit in the head and turned into a conservative.
Yeah.
I big fan of all those guys. Richard Lewis, who we just lost a couple of weeks ago, big fan of his. So I was lucky to grow up at the height of the boom. I was unlucky to start comedy right after the boom ended, which it
Mm.
would have been better because there was a lot of money to be had in the 80s. But I feel like we're going through another little boomlet now, so hopefully I can
Yeah, there's a resurgence now because of
yeah.
YouTube. There's all
Yes.
sorts of people because there's different spheres, right? You
Yeah.
have like a Joe Rogan sphere, and
Yeah.
then like Cat Williams was just on Shannon Sharp's, and that thing blew up the internet.
Right.
And what you just said in the beginning of this, teachers need to be paid more. I think Cat Williams even talked about that. He said,
Sure.
we say kids are the most important, and then we don't pay our teachers.
Absolutely. It's so funny to me because it's usually a conservative mindset of cutting education costs. And I always say to conservatives, like, you are capitalists in all other fields. And I'm a capitalist too. I like capitalism. But you wouldn't say, the next CEO of Ford should be capped at $48,000 a year and bad dental.
Right.
Because what you would say is, well, we'd get a really bad CEO of Ford if we did that. We got to pay a lot to get the best. And I go, yes, yes, you do. So why doesn't that apply to other aspects of your life, like, oh, your child's education? So yeah, pay teachers more. Listen, if you guys pay me $500,000 a year, I'm leaving comedy. Guess what? Coming back teaching. So that's my personal guarantee. Pay me $500,000 a year. I will teach again. Make it happen, Jared.
Yeah, just
Call your
reward
people.
it. If they
Yeah.
reward people that do that, people
Mhm.
will invest more in the education, and they're investing in the kids by doing that. It
Right.
seems more like a common sense thing for me, like for them to do. But if they just
Absolutely.
don't
Yeah.
do it,
I don't get it. I don't understand why. I mean, I'm married to a teacher, so that is I have some bias there. Her brother is a teacher, her dad is a former teacher, but I don't know anybody that works as hard as my wife at trying to do what's best for her students. She's a teacher of the deaf, and she legitimately cares more about these kids than anybody. I mean, I like honestly, she's constantly worried about what's best for them, and I'm just looking at it going. I get applause at the end of my day. You should get applause at the end of every lesson. I mean, it's fantastic what she does.
and apparently you get a nice little applause after sex. Sometimes I heard you say in one of your bits when she
And
uses her 4-year-old voice on you. Like, oh, good
yeah,
job, Jay. Good job.
I get a sticker. I have a book of stickers, and only if it's really good. I don't try to. I don't try to get a sticker if I don't deserve one. But I get a lollipop either way, which is nice.
Oh, very good. And I know you talk about politics a little bit. And one of the ones I was listening to yesterday, you did make a good point in something. You were saying how a lot of the comedians, they get attacked.
Right.
And you mentioned how maybe Dave Chappelle got attacked for something. And you said that they don't take a step back to reflect, okay, is there any truth in what these people are saying about whatever they're saying?
Right.
But I do think there's two parts to it, right? There's the part on the receiving end. Okay, are you going to listen to what they have to say? But then there's also the part of how do you even present the issue you're upset about too?
Right.
Because the tone and how you present it, like in the example you used, you said someone called you ableist or something like that from
Mhm.
one of your jokes.
Yeah.
And it's like how someone says that, though, to begin with their tone of voice and just the words they use, that can make all the difference in how it's received. But
Right.
I think a lot of times it's just bombarded and people are using it as like a punching bag to virtue signal a little bit. And it's not about the message, it's just about making them feel better. But if they wanted it received, maybe they would be a little more mindful of how they present it. And maybe people would be more likely to listen.
Yeah, and one of the things I've argued for a lot, because I am very much on the left, and I'm part of left wing Twitter and all of that for what it's worth. But one of the things I've argued about with my fellow people on the left is, we need to offer off ramps to
Yeah.
people who have made mistakes. And if you don't, what you wind up doing is you wind up galvanizing them in the exact opposite direction that you want to go. So if somebody says or does something that's politically incorrect, or is a mistake, or maybe it's just pure ignorance where you don't understand that a word is no longer used, or is, I grew up in the 1980s where there was a bunch of words we used that are not good words anymore. And it takes a while to train yourself not to use those words anymore. They weren't bad at the time, they became bad over time. But if somebody does something, and no matter what they apologize, or no matter how they come out and they go, maybe I was received incorrectly, maybe I said that incorrectly. If you go, no, 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 you're evil. You're an evil person. What you said is evil. That person will just lean harder into the mistake,
Yeah.
because the people on the other side will go, no, 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 you're not. Come over to here. We like you on this side. And you're always going to go to the person who's going to hug you. The person who's going to slap you. You can't do that. If I get slapped 5 or 6 times, I'm going for the hug. So, I say that not only if you're criticizing somebody, should you look at the context of it, but if you're criticizing somebody and you want to create actual change in their behavior, give them an off ramp, give them a place to go, instead of just like say, no, you messed up. So for the next few months, you have to be a unspeaking receptacle of my ire. No, no, no. That's not how people work. Give them a chance to figure out what they mistake. And like I said, that conversation about me being ableist, that was from me talking about my wife being a special ed teacher and using that voice that she uses with her special ed kids. And the person who called me ableist, number one, I had never heard the expression before. We're going back 10 years. This is at a college that I did. And I asked them and they explained it to me. And I honestly absorbed what they were saying. And I was like, I never heard that term before. You are correct that, things can be ableist and I don't want to be that way. However, I disagree that my joke is ableist because I'm not making fun of anybody who has a disability. I'm making fun of a voice that my wife uses with young children
Right.
sometimes to talk about me having sex, which is out of context. All of this sounds ridiculous, but as the joke, it works. But I do think that there's a conversation to be had sometimes and we don't have it.
True. I mean, I think my line for what is offensive is really far. Like, I have
Yeah.
a dark sense of humor. It takes a lot. It takes a lot for me. Now, it doesn't mean that anyone who calls something out is wrong to me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I have a good point, but it just takes a lot for me. And I always err on the side of the Native Americans have an expression where you can either cover the world in leather or wear moccasins. And the
Right.
people who go too hard, to me, they're trying to cover the world in moccasins. And I'm like, you know what? Toughen the people up around and say, hey, we can't control what other people are going to say or going to do, but we can
Right.
try to control our reaction to it and how we
Agreed.
feel. That's how I put more emphasis on that, because I'm a personal responsibility kind of person that we can control that. We can't control everybody else. And in fact, I think it drives people insane trying to control other people. And I think we see the results of that on both sides of the
Right.
spectrum right now. People, because right now I've worked in politics too. You don't know this, but I've worked in politics and I'm the most disenchanted right now that I've ever been.
It's
And
tough. It's a tough time to be. Election years are rough. This one in particular is going to be very rough.
oh, it's going to be wild. And I just think right now it's a shame that between Trump and Biden, this is what America has to show for itself. Of all the brilliant minds that we have and smart people, a Trump versus Biden is what we're left with. And it's really a product of the two-party system.
Yeah.
That's what you get. You have one more choice for president than communist Russia at the end of the day. One viable choice.
Right.
And both of the Democrat and Republican establishments, they control so much. People don't even understand how much they control. They don't understand that Bernie Sanders probably won in Iowa in 2016, but the DNC stepped on the scale for Hillary to help her win because they thought she would have a better chance to win. Oh, maybe not. Turns out that wasn't right. But people don't realize the parties, there's no mention of them in the Constitution, so they can do what they want. They don't have to pick who you vote for as the person. With the delegate system, that's what matters. The delegates matter, not the people. And they don't always have to vote with the people. So I don't think people know that, but it's a disenchanting system to me.
I'd agree. I think that there's lots of ways that we could probably fix this, and unfortunately, the level for fixing stuff in the Constitution is a barrier that I think we're probably not going to get around, especially considering state legislatures are each controlled by either Democrats or Republicans, and neither of them have it in their interest to blow up a system that benefits them. So I'd agree that this is disenchanting. I do hope, I look at younger generations. I look at my son's generation, especially, Gen Z coming up seems to have married some of the best aspects of Gen X and millennials in a way that I really like. They seem to be, a little bit less self-aggrandizing than your generation can sometimes be. If I can say the millennials, every time I criticize millennials, they come out of the woodwork to attack me. But hear me out, millennials. You're good people. You are very good people. You try to make the world a better place. I just feel like Gen Z has all of your social justice with maybe fewer of your hangups. And I'm very excited about that. I want to see what the world looks like when they get into control. But hey, I'm Gen X. All I know is that I enjoy Pop-Tarts and being left alone. But to go back to what you were saying about the offensive line, to me, my whole rule of thumb about offensiveness is, which way are you punching? And if you're punching down, my question is always why? What are you hoping to achieve by punching down? And if there's a marginalized community at the end of your joke, it better be a really good joke. right, to justify that. But I do think that what tends to happen is, and I always say this to young comics as well when they do their first open mic, when you're hanging out with your friends, you can speak very ironically to your friends in a dark way that does not upset them. And if you see young men coming out to comedy clubs, will make a lot of violent sex jokes in their first
Violent,
time.
huh?
Violent sex, like what? And I'm using a very generic example, but I hear a lot of variations on this among young comics. I got my girlfriend's here tonight. She's out in the trunk of my car, right? That you hear a variation of that all the time, and it never gets a laugh. It always gets like a at the best. It gets a and they look shocked, like how come that thing? My friends love that joke, and I have to explain to them because your friends know that you are being ironic, that you are not that kind of person. That audience does not know that, so your use of ironic imagery there is not a juxtaposition of two things that don't sit right because you are not that person. It's just a gross joke about sexual violence that probably shouldn't be made. So I always say to people, like, understand that the audience isn't your friends. They don't know who you are. So when you are making choices about what to joke about, they're going to make judgments about that. And you better have some justification in your mind as to why you're making those
Mm,
jokes. Otherwise, you just look like a really weird pervert who's into sexual violence.
sure.
And
That's a
I'm a
good point.
weird pervert, but not sexually violent. I just like
Uh,
weird stuff. No.
well, because for a comic to be really good, it takes a lot of social intelligence and calibration to know what that line is. I
Yeah,
think Mark Normand, if you know who that
I
is,
do. Yeah,
I
he's
think
good.
he does a really good job at that, where he pushes it
Yep.
like, and he gets up to that line, but he doesn't go too far over the line usually. And he's a fairly like a moderate comic, I guess is what I would call him.
Absolutely. And listen, finding I think Anthony Jeselnik, who is somebody that I've really come to respect, watching him think about the kind of dark humor he does. He talks about, he quotes Andy Warhol saying art is getting away with it. And it's true. It's not, did I make an offensive joke and everybody got mad at me and now I'm a canceled comic and I'm a crusader of the First Amendment? That's a failure, right? A good joke is, if it's offensive or it's about offensive material, is one that the audience laughs at and does not get offended at, because you've presented it in such a way and you've couched it in such a way that your intentions were clear. I'm making a silly joke about something that we all find very scary, and I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to make you laugh about it. And Jeselnik does that great. He talks about really, really dark stuff, but he does it in such a way that the audience is always with him. And I really wish more young comics would look at what he does and go, all right, well, if I'm going to do this, let me think about how I'm going to do it, instead of just coming out and talking about
Right.
racism or sexism and ha ha ha, isn't it funny that I'm saying it? And it's like, no, it's not. You got to figure out a way to say it.
Exactly. And I think it's one of the few ways to actually talk about things in a way, if you do it properly,
Yeah.
that people will listen. If you couch it in humor, you can actually talk about a serious issue and get people to think about it in a way and deeper than they would if you were just having a back and forth discussion. Because if you're just
Absolutely.
regularly having a back and forth discussion, people's defenses go up and they get
100.
angry and they get upset and they'll use ad hominems and they'll be a debate pro. But if you're, say, Mark Normand, you can talk about things like he's got that pedo joke about what did he say? He goes, "It's just luck that I'm not one." He goes, "When I was in third grade, I like third grade girls, but now that I'm an adult, I like adult women.
Right.
And when I was in third grade, I like grape juice, but now I'm an adult, I like red wine.
Right.
But I still
Yeah.
like grape juice." He goes, "You see how close that was?" So you can
Yeah.
talk about things that it's pushing it, but he gets people to think of it in a way that if it was just a normal discussion, people's guard would go up instantly
Right.
in some of these discussions. So they're just not going to.
And I think the key there is what you just said, is he is, in order to make you think about it, he has to think about it first.
Yeah.
And that is the difference. And I do think that a guy who's just coming up, and I say guy generally, I don't mean to be sexist, but it's generally the dudes who are being offensive for offensive sake. But like, if a guy comes up and just sort of spouts out something about race, religion, sexuality, gender, whatever, just because he thought of a funny punchline. He didn't put enough effort into thinking about what he was trying to say. And I think that's the difference. Think about it first, because, and I'll be the first to defend a comic who says something inadvertently wrong. Because if you're talking on stage, eventually you're going to mess up. It's like if you host a podcast or, an interview show, Jared, you're talking to people all the time. Eventually you're going to say something where people are going to, whoa, Jared, whoa. I'll be the first to defend you and say, like, listen, when you're filling hours of airtime, you're going to say something stupid eventually. I always say, give them the off ramp, give them the benefit of the doubt. And in the meantime, if we're going to do that, at least give us the benefit of forethought before you speak.
And I think even a path back, like a path back to forgiveness in some ways too. I don't know if there is one right now, or at least a viable one. It's really, once you're out, you're out. Now, some people like Shane Gillis, for example, he kind of made it, and some people do this too. They'll make a living off of being kicked out of a mainstream thing. You see that a lot more on the right? You see like a Brett Weinstein or Jordan Peterson or fill in the blank, somebody that had a big thing happen, and they'll use like the obstacle as the way, and they'll launch a career from it.
Right.
But
well, I think that as it's currently situated, the right is an oppositional force right now, in the sense that if there is something in the establishment, they don't like it, because the establishment will tell you, you hear it in MAGA talk all the time about, like, we're against the swamp, we're against the uniparty, we're against this. It's really, it's what are you rebelling against? What do you got? So I think if somebody is kicked out of polite society, they're going to find a home on the right pretty easily. And, there's a lot of opportunity on that side. And I think the thing about Shane that's interesting is that he was adopted by a lot of those guys, but his comedy is kind of mocking those guys. Like, his comedy is not.
I don't think they're smart enough to know it, though.
Yeah, they're sitting there going, "Oh, he's one of us." Like, I don't think he is, guys. I think he's making fun of you. He's just being funny.
I think it's a little bit of both, is what I think it is.
Yeah, that's probably closer to the truth. But I do think it's interesting that, like, he's supposed to be this crusader on the right. It's like, he's not a crusader on the right. He's just a funny dude. So
he's more moderate. Like, I think he goes back and forth, right? He can make fun of the right, he'll make fun of the left, but he's not like all in on one of the sides.
Right. And I think he's not a political comic. He talks about things in a way that is more complicated than his fans would probably believe.
Correct. But he's the one who does a good job with it, I'll say, as well. But right now, overall, that it's unfortunate, but there does seem to be like Republican right of center comics. And then you don't see as much, I don't hear as much about the left of center comics anymore. It's really just the ones who are right of center. I think they're the ones that you hear the most about a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, they're platformed now. I mean, Greg Gutfeld's show is the number one 11 p.m. slot. I have no idea how that is. But there's a lot of grandfathers watching Fox News at 11 p.m. The people who get platformed there are, they're touring now, a lot of times. And I do wonder, and I don't want to say I'm lucky, but I think the fact that I'm not pigeonholed by that, like, if you are considered a right-wing comic, all of a sudden do you have to write everything for that audience? Like, if you just want to, like, if you happen to think that Trump maybe made a mistake in paying a porn star 130, can you not make that joke anymore? Or, like, can you only make jokes about Biden? It strikes me as maybe a little bit limiting to be pigeonholed, even though it might be lucrative. Who knows? You know what? I'm a capitalist. Greg Gutfeld, if you're listening, I'll come on your show if I can make some money. Come on.
You're like Clint Eastwood from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. You'll work for the Republicans, you'll work for the leftists, the socialists, the communists.
At the end of the day, I just want to be rich.
There you go. That's the kind of honesty I can get behind. I love it.
I just want to be well off enough for my 30th reunion. I want to make all the girls who would not go out with me feel bad. Is that too much to ask? It doesn't feel like it should be.
No, I wouldn't think so. But I mean, even on the right, there's a lot of sensitive people there that they won't admit it, but they are just as sensitive as the other side as well, if not more even in some cases.
Oh, believe me,
it can be a little ridiculous.
I see them on my Twitter timeline all day long. There's a large degree of victimization that has happened, and people, anybody that is willing to give purchase to your victimization, your self-victimization, will get your vote and your dollar. So I think that, one of the innovations of Donald Trump, honestly, is that he gave voice to a large number of people who felt victimized by the system. And they were mad that they had not achieved as much as they wanted in life, and they were looking for someone other than themselves to blame. And Donald Trump provided that for them. So I think that's a lot of where his initial popularity came from. And what's the thing that makes me laugh about that is just that they're the first ones to tell you that they're the party of self-responsibility. And it's like, well, then if that's the case, how come everything you say is about somebody else that you don't like? Just throwing it out there, maybe it's you too.
Now, you see, I've worked in Pennsylvania since 2016 doing political polling and whatnot. So I would say I might have spoken to more Pennsylvania voters of maybe anyone since 2016.
I'm very interested to hear what you have to say here.
So what I'll say is I don't think Trump will win because there's probably about 20% of Republicans that really can't stand him in Pennsylvania. And there are people that are maybe never Trumpers or there's anyone but Trump. And not many people like Biden, but there's plenty of people who hate Trump. And just that 15-20% of Republicans that don't like him, that's going to cost him in the purple states. Throw in some Roe versus Wade in there. That'll cost him in purple states too. And with that, I don't see him winning. And I just see a January 6th part 2 from Mar-a-Lago next time. But I can see that coming from a mile away because there's just too many people that hate him, and hate is a strong motivator. It's going to get him out.
I've been saying this on Twitter for a while, and I don't want to jinx it, and I don't want anybody to become complacent, but I think Trump loses bigger than he did last time.
That's possible.
I think that, and I think that the entire Republican Party is about to be decimated in the House. They might hold the Senate because it's a favorable map this year. But in all honesty, I think that, he's got his people running the RNC now. Trump does. And they're not going to have money to spend on down ballot races because all of that money is going to be going to, New York State at some point for paying for various crimes. I think that this is going to be a brutal beating. And in all honesty, I don't know if the Republican Party survives Trump as it's currently situated. I think there's too many people, like you just talked about, right of center, but guys who loved Reagan, maybe loved Bush, maybe held their nose, but enjoyed Bush too. But that want to return to hey, maybe lower taxes and not so much insane 3 a.m. Adderall ranting from the toilet. Right. Maybe that's what we want.
I mean, what I would say to people is him being the nominee is the least likely person to win. I think DeSantis, he would have beaten Biden. Problem is he's just not as charismatic. On the age element.
Yeah.
If Biden would beat DeSantis, it would be the first time ever that someone with more hair and who was younger lost.
Right.
On that demographic, he would win. And even maybe Nikki Haley, even maybe her, she could have as well. But me, I never really hated Trump. I was pretty much neutral on Trump. The worst thing I think he did was just not admit defeat in the election. Him going on with the election stolen narrative thing. I think that was the most damaging thing that he did because now the whole democracy is in question. And now every time a Republican loses, that's going to be the first thing they think. Oh, it was stolen. And that is such a dangerous place to be. So I think I never hated him as much as a lot of the people on the left hate him. But him not doing that, I think that really hurt him. And to me, that was the worst thing that he did.
Well, you're an expert in narcissism. Let's talk about. I mean, do you see him? I mean, I see him as a malignant narcissist, category, book, textbook.
Oh, absolutely, he is. Without a question, he is.
Yeah, and I think that I always say that narcissists make the best storytellers. That's why so many comedians are narcissists, because you invest at the energy level of the person that is talking. So if the person is talking thinks that what they're saying is the most important thing on the planet Earth, you just instinctually go, well, this must be very important. And meanwhile, they're talking about windmill cancer. I always talk about Howard Stern back in the day would talk about a bowel movement that he had. And you'd be like, I can't get out of my car. I got to listen to see the end of this bowel movement story. And you're like, what's happening to me? And it's well, that's a narcissist who knows how to communicate effectively. One of the things I always tell comics is if you want to grab an audience's attention, talk like you're the only person who knows where the last life raft on the Titanic is, right?
Mm.
And however that would be, like, would you yell it? How would you say that if you were trying to communicate to somebody? You have to go down that door and hang a right, and you'll be saved. Like, how would you communicate that? And people will listen to what you have to say if you can do that effectively. But I look at Trump and I say, Washington is full of narcissists. I think that's true. But that malignant narcissism, that thing of, if you don't love me to the level that I want to be loved, not only will I cut you out, I'll burn the house down with it. Right. I'd rather burn to death in a house fire that I lit than let you make me leave this house. That's where I say, it's not just the danger signs were there from day one. And you're right. The worst thing he ever did was take the fundamental aspect of American life, which is democracy. And, as Biden says, and I said for a long time, we're not at the level that we want to be when it comes to treating people correctly and equality and true democracy. But we had a system that was better than autocracy. And, the fact that the right has so embraced autocracy right now is a little disturbing. Well, I would say a little disturbing in the sense that it's an existential problem for the United States of America.
Well,
so I'm a little nervous about it.
I mean, Trump's taken the Republicans off the rails a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's because, though, people that like him, they're not even really Republicans.
No.
They really just like Trump. And the people who are in charge of the Republicans or of the conservative pundits, they have had to cater to it. None of them really lived by principles. And you can say what you want about Nixon, for example, but that was his thing. He said, we have to live by principles and have morals in our capitalism. And even in 1960, when he lost to Kennedy, he said it would be more harmful to the country for me to challenge this than the other way around. And that's Nixon who said that. And I think if Trump would have played by that playbook, I think he would have a much better chance to win this upcoming election if he just would have said something along those lines and say, hey, I lost, but I'll come back in 2024 and win. Instead of what he did.
Right.
That's the worst thing for him to do.
That's the malignant part of the narcissism, right? He hurts himself because he can't let go of the idea of the lie to preserve himself. So, that's the problem that you face there. So,
what I'd want to see is this. I'd want to see the look on his face when Kanye asked him to be his vice president. So Kanye goes to Mar-a-Lago with Nick Fuentes and he said, hey, Mr. Trump, be my vice president. And Donald Trump was not very happy about that at all.
No.
But
listen, whoever is dealing with Kanye right now, you know how crazy you have to be to out crazy Trump? I mean, that's insane levels of crazy. I don't know what's happening with Kanye. I like the College Dropout. I thought that was good. I liked was it 808s and what was the other 808s and whatever. He had good albums, but he's dropped far off the mental rails. I don't know what's happening with Kanye. If you know Kanye West and you're listening to this, ask him to send me an email so I can ask him what's going on.
I think what happens is when you get a certain level of fame and money, you can kind of get a little disconnected or disenchanted. And
Jared, that's my goal. Of that. I want to get disconnected. Get me more money so I can get disconnected from people.
All you want is the opportunity to prove that money can't buy happiness.
That's right. I feel like I could probably make a good go of happiness with enough money. I don't know.
It's always better to cry in a Maserati than on a bicycle.
Exactly. And I would listen. I guarantee right now, if your audience helps make me rich and famous, I will use that money as irresponsibly as possible. I want people to understand I will gold plate my face. I will get a jewel encrusted mink coat that I will wear at all times of the day and night. And if it's too hot, I'll have people coming around to fan me so I can continue to wear my mink coat even in the summertime. That's the J Black guarantee, ladies and gentlemen.
People get behind that level of authenticity, though. They like it when people own it. And there's people out there that if they own it, there's nothing that people can use against them once they own it, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Absolutely.
So this is something I didn't know before to pivot here, but you have a podcast called the TV Show Podcast with Rhea Hughes and Angelo Cataldi. Now, anyone not in this area, they probably don't know who that is, but that's a Philadelphia sports radio. Angelo was part of the morning team for about 30 years.
on
and Rhea
WIP.
Hughes was
Yep.
his co-host there. But you have a show with them both now about
Yes.
TV shows.
Yeah, we do it. We record every Wednesday. It drops Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And I was, for the longest time, it was a comic in the area, and I wrote a TV column for AOL back when AOL still existed in its, close to original state. And Angelo had me on for like 15 years. I would call in every Friday, and we would just talk TV. I'd give him a show to watch. He would tell me what he was watching. And as he retired, I was like, "Do you want to do a podcast?" And he said yes. And it does very well, especially in this area. But like, I look, and it's podcasts are interesting because we have like 96% of our audience is Philadelphia, but then we'll get like 2 listens from Micronesia. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I'd like to fly out and meet the person who's listening to the podcast in Micronesia. But it's a lot of fun, and I love TV. As I said to my dad when I was 7 years old, TV is my life. And I just enjoy chatting with him, and it's just nice hearing Angelo's voice. If you are a fan of Philadelphia sports, you've listened to it for 30 years. So if you just go look up the TV show podcast, or go to my website jblack.tv, we have 80 episodes, and you can listen to all of them for free.
And he mentioned something that I didn't know, that you had written a pilot called
Yes.
Paulie, and Paul
Yeah.
Sorvino was in there.
Paul Sorvino, Janine Garofalo, Michael Madsen, and the kid who is currently on TED, Max Burkholder. And that's actually what brought it up, because I was watching TED going, I know that kid. Where do I know that kid from? And it didn't occur to me until like after I was done watching the series. Oh, he worked for me. I did a pilot that I created with my writing partner, Brian Herzlinger, and he came in and played the kid in the pilot, 10 years ago. So I showed it to Angelo. He loved it and said, you should put it on your YouTube. And they did. If you go to Hello J Black and you go to my YouTube, you can watch the whole pilot right now until I guess whoever owns the rights to it comes and tells me I can't put it up there anymore. So don't tell them. But otherwise, you can check it out, and I'm proud of it. It's some of the best work I ever did.
Yeah, and Paul Sorvino, for those who don't know, he's Paulie from Goodfellas.
Yep.
So he's a big time guy, big time actor.
He was fantastic in it too. He was such a sweetheart to work with, and just watching just him and Janine Garofalo go back and forth. Janine, great comic, one of my all-time favorites, and the two of them improving scenes together. It's awesome.
And they had said, like, when you were trying to pitch that, people didn't like the fact that it was going to be like The Sopranos or something. Is that one of the things they said?
What happened was, it's a story about a mob boss who has a heart attack and decides, he's got a chance to get out of the business. But he stays in Jersey because he finds out he has a grandson that he didn't know about, that his estranged daughter had kept from him. So he stays in Jersey, and the New York mob not thrilled about this, and et cetera, et cetera. So it was our pitch at the time was Breaking Good. Can a mob boss go good? And we were pitching it like 2010, 11, 12. I forget exactly when, but right in that area. And it was The Sopranos had just ended, so HBO didn't want to do anything that touched on the mob. Showtime was interested, but they didn't want to look like they were following in HBO's footsteps. So where it got set up was the DirecTV had its own channel for a while, the Audience Network, and they were going to do it as an original. So we were all excited about that. And then everybody that worked at the Audience channel got fired. And the new regime did not want us to, they were like, well, no, we'll check it out. And we never heard from them again. So this project, which was, I thought, the best work I ever did, sort of floundered and did not get picked up. So I'm hoping people go check it out. I don't think anything will happen with it. I just want people to see it because I feel like it's a pretty good representation of what I can do.
How many episodes are there?
Just the one. It was a pilot. We shot one episode and we shopped it around, and that it ended there. But I rewatched it, with knowing that Angelo was looking at it, and I was just like, wow. One of the best things about forgetting that you did something and then going back to it is you get to watch it as an audience member and not as somebody just picking out the flaws and mistakes and remembering, oh, I remember that day I had the waffles on set. You get to watch and sort of really see it as an audience member. And I really like it. I'm happy that I was involved with that. And Brian directed the hell out of it. It's just some of my best work.
Yeah. How do you even set that up to begin with? How do you even begin the process of filming a pilot? And
And for
partnering with
this
Brian.
for this particular one, Brian and I went to high school together, and we started writing in middle school, back in middle school. And when he went out to Hollywood and I started doing stand up, we decided to work together. And we had done a bunch of scripts. Some of them had gotten bought by big companies and they paid a lot of money and then they never made it. Uh, some of them were smaller companies, and one of the smaller companies hired us to do a movie, and they really liked the movie that we wrote for them and Brian directed. And they said, "Okay, well, what else do you want to do?" And we said, "Well, we know Paul Sorvino, and we have this idea. If Paul says yes, can we make the pilot?" And the company said sure, and Paul said yes. So we did it that way.
And Paul Sorvino also father to Mira Sorvino, isn't
Yeah.
she? Or isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Mira Sorvino, Academy Award winner. Mira Sorvino for
Important distinction there.
yeah, he did not win one. She did. I don't know if there's any
Okay.
issues with that, but yeah, she's
Okay.
somebody online said maybe you should redo this with Mirror, and I'm like, yes, let's make that happen.
Yeah,
I
why
doubt
not?
that will happen, but I really want people just to check it out, just for the fun of it, just to see what people think, because I really like it.
So if you like mob stuff, you might like this.
Yeah, and it takes place in South Jersey. The high school that the kid goes to is Cherokee High School, because that's where I went.
Oh,
Had second unit footage from the area, so like Olga's diner shows up. It's on 295. I mean, you get a real sense of the area. So
that's
it's
pretty cool. It'd be cool to see that. It's kind of like how that show Mayor of Eastwich or whatever it was in
yeah.
Pennsylvania was about Delco.
Yep, and you get to hear Wawa a lot. So
There you
no
go.
Wawa here, but it's fun. It's on the YouTube now. Check it out before I get a cease and desist letter from the company that owns the rights to it. So
Yeah, so everyone should check that out if they haven't already.
yeah,
And back then, that golden age of TV with The
yeah.
Sopranos, The Wire, 6 Feet Under, it's unbelievable to me that all three of those shows were on at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's things really changed at the turn of the century, and The Sopranos is the one that started it. And I do think, and I've talked about this in other venues, but David Chase, the guy who did The Sopranos, worked on the Rockford Files, and the Rockford Files is like 70s TV, James Garner, like just when you are thinking about your bog standard 70s episodic television show, that's your show. And then he hated it. He hated working on a show like that, and he vowed he would never work in that venue again till he got the opportunity to do The Sopranos. And I do think that what you get, it's somebody who knew all the rules of television and then knew which ones to break.
Mm.
So I do think when you look at like early 2000s TV, you look at people that are coming out of network television. And for whatever we want to say about network TV, they knew how to hold your attention. Like they knew what they were doing in little 8-minute chunks in between commercial breaks. But they also knew all the rules that if they could break would make TV better. So I
Mm.
think you get that time from like 2000 to 2010 where I put Mad Men in there too. Where you just get all these old network guys who just know how to do TV. And I wonder if we're waning a little bit now because the people coming up are not coming up in writers' rooms on network shows of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Even Vince Gilligan, or Vince Gilligan worked on the X Files, right? So these guys come out and they're like, I know what I used to tell you guys about poetry, right? Ezra Pound wrote a sonnet a day before he started writing the poetry that would, shake things up in the 19th century in free verse. You have to master the technique before you can break the form. So
Mm.
I really like that time.
So, what are your favorite shows? What's Jay Black's top three?
The Bear is absolutely phenomenal. That's still on. Succession was maybe the best show of the last 5 years. I absolutely adore Succession. And one show now, I'm not going to put this in my top three of all time or my top three going. I'm really enjoying the Truman Capote show, Feud, Truman Capote versus the Swans. That was an Angelo pick a while ago, and I was just reminded of it because they had like 10,000 commercials for it at the Oscars. But it's just so pulpy and delicious fun. well worth your time if you have. I think it's on Hulu or FX or one of the million TV channels that I pay for.
Mm. See, I don't watch as much TV anymore because I'm just been like creating, but I should. But I also think this. I think the smartphones here. I think there's a line in the sand where people started watching smartphones or watching like going on their phones all the time.
Yeah.
The quality of TV kind of took a little step back, I thought, for a little bit. 'Cause I think it takes away from people's craft. I think all this time people spend scrolling
Yeah.
is time that maybe they spent doing something else before, and now they
Well,
don't do it that way.
it's interesting because I look at the stats on the people that have already watched Paulie online. And Paulie opens with like a 45-second pan shot, right? So it starts, you don't know what's going on. You hear somebody being beaten up. You see Paulie sort of enter backlit with red, like the devil entering into hell. And he smokes a cigarette, and all you see is the little red dot of the cigarette smoking. And it's just this really great scene. And I realize half the people stop watching, like in that 45-second pan, because it does not instantly grab their attention.
Mm,
And I looking back on it, like the one change that I would make is I would go like, listen, we're dealing with TikTokers here, everybody.
yeah,
We can't have that. I read something about like you can tell the difference between Gen Xers and Gen Z on TikTok because Gen Xers have like half a millisecond before they start talking in their TikToks because they hit the button, they wait for it to record, and then they go. Whereas the Gen Z would rather have the first syllable cut off than make you wait half a second for the person to start talking. So I do think like I don't know if I because my son is 16, he watched Killers of the Flower Moon. He can sit through a 4-hour movie, but I do think like when you're dealing with when you have options and you're scrolling through the options, it does make things need to be a little sped up in order to compete with all the other options that are
sure.
available.
And that's why they say now it's not even about time management, it's about attention management for people. Managing their attention is going to be the hardest struggle. Now, as a parent, how many kids do you have?
Last I checked, 3, but who knows? My wife has been gone most of the afternoon. So
Ah, okay.
no, so three. 16,
So
13, and 8.
and it's going to be very interesting to see what the kids that have grown up on social media and in front of a screen, what are they going to be like when they're adults? What's it doing to their social skills? What's it doing to their attention spans? I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, maybe not in a good way,
Right.
but we'll have to see how that goes.
We'll see. I try not to get too alarmist about it only because, one of my favorite things is to go back and read like New York Times editorials from the 1840s going, these kids with their poetry, and you look at like the 1900s, it's like these kids with their 5-cent movie theaters that they're going to. Like, I think every generation worries about it. I think that there's a lot of problems that come with it, but human beings just wherever you are, I'm sure if you went back to caveman times, there would be like cavemen going, these kids, all they do is look at the fire. My day we didn't even have fire. These kids, they stare at the fire
That's
all day
true.
long.
There's
So
truth in what you're saying with that for sure.
I think they're going to be, listen, they're going to have a lot of problems, but I will say the thing that I find very interesting about Gen Z, especially, is they're very acute in their ability to speak about their problems. Right? They are very upfront, and my daughter will use things like my anxiety makes me feel like blank. And I grew up in the 80s. I didn't even know how to use the word anxiety until my 20s. You know what I mean? Like I did not know how to describe the feeling of not wanting to do something because I was nervous about how it was going to play out, because I just looked at it as being weak or having nerves, and like that sort of insular, like there's something wrong
Right.
with me. Um, my son, they don't have that same stigma. They're very quick about doing it. So for all the bad stuff that comes with it, having 5 million other kids talking about their anxiety every day on TikTok, I do think gives them a sense of community and a sense of hope that they can overcome it that I didn't have. So
Right.
there's good and bad in everything.
I think Mark Norman was making a good joke about it too. He said there's a gym culture right now where people have shirts about the gym like, "Do you even lift, bro?" And he
Right.
said there needs to be a therapy a therapy culture where we're working out our muscles. Why not work out our emotions and have that on like a t-shirt too? But your kid's generation is already pretty good with that anyway. Mark
Yeah.
Norman's talking about it from someone my age, that our age group didn't do that as much.
No, and I see it with Elon Musk recently tweeted, "Put on my gravestone that I never went to therapy." It's like, we don't need to, Elon. We know. But I do think that there's an undercurrent. The one thing I'm very worried about is this sort of like alpha male bro science influencer sphere of like, you don't need to go to therapy, bro. You just need sunlight and push-ups. It's like, no, no, you need therapy. And I do think that there's a number of young men. I hear it from my wife's colleagues that fall under that sort of spell. And the one thing I do look out for is trying to dispel at any moment that, when I hear a kid go, Andrew Tate, I have to sit him down and go, yeah, he's an awful human, and don't ever be like that. Don't,
right. But even Andrew Tate, I think there are some things that I can appreciate about him.
Andrew Tate got into my house and blew up the camera. Sorry,
he's about to sex traffic you if you're not careful. Yeah. But I would say, like, there's some things that I even appreciate about his message. He has a lot of good mindset stuff, but at the same point, he's also grifting. At the same point, it's about his $50 a month Hustlers University or the War Room. Right. But I think it takes a level of social intelligence to realize what's the grift, what's valuable, pull out what's valuable, ignore the rest. Now, a lot of people, they're not capable of doing that. We're in an all black and all white thing.
Right.
Where
and especially the kids, it's middle schoolers watching this guy going, oh, I what I want to be like. And middle schoolers, I don't know if you know this or not known for their subtlety. No. Not known for their nuanced take on things. So they're pulling away sort of just the misogyny. And, I think that's dangerous.
And I would say this about it too. It's same thing with Trump, right? Trump would be a symptom of things. Same with that, as you would call it, alpha male culture. That's a symptom of people not really paying attention to men on the left, I would say. Instead, they're all just told, you have white privilege. You are this, you are that. And that's why I don't like the whole identity game, period, because I think all it does eventually is divide. Now, it doesn't mean there's no truth in the identity game. I just don't think it's not something to really focus on. So I think a lot of people, they don't feel like they're welcome on the left because you're just a patriarchal oppressor, especially if you're a white man.
Right.
And so they go to the other side where they're hugged over there. But nuance is where it should be. But it's so hard. It's so hard to get there for a lot of people because they get really emotional. And it's a superpower right now to disagree in a way that you don't hate somebody. So few people seem to be able to do that.
Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
That's like what I talk about, right? People who can disagree and still be okay and have object constancy with it. That's a superpower in this day and age. People go to all black or all white right away.
Yeah, social media has a real flattening effect on nuance. It's real hard to get, the subtleties of oppression or patriarchal oppression, especially in a 280 character tweet. I think that it's hard sometimes because you don't want to say to maybe a marginalized community to soften your language. But I do think that a marketing to men who maybe feel like they've been left behind might not be a bad idea, if only to sort of make them understand where the other side is coming from. I do think as a white man, I do say to other white men, it's okay to try to see it from other people's points of view. And I do think that one of the problems that our side has, white men especially, is that the very second something starts to shift, we go, well, now we're being oppressed. And it's like, no, it's all right. It's the things are moving, but just because you've always sat in the front seat doesn't mean having to sit in the back seat is oppression. It just means somebody else gets to sit in the front seat.
Right.
Now.
So I don't even buy that part of it either, because I would say I'm all about what I can do. Right. I would never say I'm oppressed. I would never say like, oh, now I'm a victim. I hate that.
Right.
I hate it when anyone says it, even though there's some truth in it in some cases, for sure. Right. People do get displaced and have all sorts of problems. And it's true. Like I read Obama's book, for example, the one about his dad. that did change my thinking a lot. And even though I agree and understand where he's coming from, I still think his mindset in there is a little bit destructive. I don't think it's as helpful. Where like, and you realize once I read that book, I see things like the Cat Williams and Shannon Sharp discussion differently, because people will say like the right wing comics like Andrew Schultz and someone else,
Sure.
they were calling out white people. And what I was thinking to myself was, well, Cat Williams and Shannon Sharp, they're talking race automatically. It's understood that they're talking race because they know what it's like. They're both black men.
Right.
So they both understand what that is like. And I learned that from Obama's book. He was talking about how when white guys come into a place, the black people who are there, they're going to start thinking differently and talking differently because there's a white person around.
Right.
And just knowing that layer is there really changed my thinking.
Well, I'll give you an example. Like one of the things that I got hip to was just this idea that I never walk around at night worried, right? I just don't. Now, maybe if I walked into a bad neighborhood and it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I heard a wolf howl and some gunshots, I would be worried. But I drive all the time to gigs all over the place. And if I stop at a rest stop at 3 a.m., I'm never walking out of that rest stop sort of aware of who's walking around me. I'm 6'3". I'm a white man. I'm 240 pounds. I'm not generally going to be messed with in any way that I have to worry about. So there's a certain privilege to that, right? I mean, that's the word that you would use, right? There's a certain privilege to not ever have to worry about those things. And now you take a woman in that same situation, right? A woman who's walking out at 3 o'clock in the morning, she is very aware of everyone around her because there are predators that will, maybe 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100 won't do anything, but that they have to be aware in a way that I don't have to be aware. So if I'm walking out of a rest stop at 3 o'clock in the morning, at the same time that a woman is walking out of a rest stop at 3 o'clock in the morning, I stop and go back into the rest stop. And I wait for her to walk so that at no time does she have to be worried that I'm going to be walking with her. I don't think that's a big thing. It's not a big change in my life that I have to make. I'm just trying to make her life just a scintilla better. And it doesn't affect me one way or the other. It's 40 extra seconds to get to my car. And what I would say is, and I'll let you talk, but this is what I would say. There is a large degree of men that would get offended at the very idea that this woman would be worried that I'm not going to rape you. So how could you be upset with me? And to those guys, I would say, well, yeah, okay, fine. But you don't get offended at the fact she's worried. Just make her life a little bit better if you can. How is that difficult? How does that make your life worse to make her life better? And I don't think that's a victim mentality on her part. And I don't think that's me being oppressed or being shoved down for being a white man. I think it's just a situation where I can make someone's life easier, so why wouldn't I?
So to understand that example, you're at a rest stop at 3 a.m.
Yes.
And you are there and a woman is there.
And we're walking out at the same time.
And you wouldn't want to do that because you would think that she might think that you're going to assault her or something?
In that scenario, I'm a big dude. Right? It's nighttime. There's 2 cars in the parking lot. We're walking out together. I just stopped in to go to the bathroom. I'm just going to wait and let her walk to her car without me walking behind her or near her in that scenario, because I don't know what she's thinking. Maybe she's not worried. Maybe she's fine. But to me, it's an extra 30 seconds of my time to make sure that she feels comfortable that nothing bad's going to happen to her because a big dude that she doesn't know is near her. And that's just, I think little things like that, being aware that other people have these perspectives. The privilege isn't that like you're given life on a platter. You're not. The privilege is there are things that you don't have to think about that they do. And if you can be aware of those things and you can make that little change just to make them a little bit more comfortable, why not do it? It's just an easy thing to do to make the world a little bit nicer for other people. That's all.
So I think if I had a daughter, like what I would tell her is I'd want to empower her to make sure she's safe. And
Sure.
I know what the left would say is, well, you shouldn't have to tell her that. The world should do things differently. And I would say, well, it's really not reality. Like what you just said is probably how many men out of 100 do you think would do that?
Probably two, me and my son,
There,
because I've told my
right.
son to do the same thing. But I'm also telling you on this podcast, right, or this interview, and I think that the more men tell each other that, it just becomes a little bit easier. And you do both. I say to my daughter, have your keys in your fist, ready to take an eye out, have mace ready to go. But to my son, I say, just let the girl go, so she doesn't have to have the mace in her hand and the keys in her pocket. Why not? Why not just do a little
So
bit to make the world easier for them?
So the devil's advocate would be, say you know you're not going to do anything harmful,
Hmm.
right? And you still wouldn't want to do like just even being there is a problem in that case. You're
Yeah,
saying.
because we have to live realistically in the world. And if I'm doing statistics and I'm just going to say, what do I need to be worried about if I'm a 5'3" girl in her 20s? The 6'3" lumbering white dude, and I do tend to lumber, I'm not light on my feet, is the person to be worried about. So in that scenario, I could get upset and go, well, I'm not like that. Or I can go, I can see where you would be worried about that. I'm going to let you walk to your car on a now. I'm not saying you do this at 5 p.m. when there's 10,000 people there. I'm just saying in that particular scenario, and just being hip to privilege, just being hip to the idea of like, all right, this is a scenario where I don't get nervous, but other people do. How can I make them less nervous? I think you do that over the course of 15,000 decisions you make in a lifetime. Everybody's life just gets a little bit nicer, right? It's like if you have a relative who's hard of hearing, I think that's the correct term. Uh, you have to repeat yourself. Do you get annoyed that you have to repeat yourself? You have to go, well, I shouldn't have to speak up just because your ears don't work as well as they did 30 years ago. Or do you speak up because that's just the easy thing to do to make their life a little bit nicer? You go, I'm sorry, Aunt BB. What I said was you pooped your pants. No, I'm only joking. I'm just making a joke there. But
I get
yeah,
annoyed.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
get annoyed as someone who has a grandmother who has a deaf ear. I
yeah.
shouldn't get annoyed, but I do get annoyed.
But
And that's just like
you
it's
understand
just
you
like the
shouldn't get
initial
annoyed.
reaction. I
Yeah,
know I
you
shouldn't,
right.
but I
And
still do.
you say to yourself, okay, and you stop and you go, should I get annoyed here? And you calm down and you repeat yourself because
Yes.
that's what good people do. And I just think like the conversation, and again, I think you're right in that, vilifying, straight white males is not the way to go about this. The way to go about it is empowering straight white males to go like, listen, I know your life isn't easy because everybody's life is hard, but understand there are certain scenarios. I have a friend who's a 6'4" black comic. He is a great comedian, by the way. Love the guy. He told me, he was like, I'll explain privilege to you in 1 second. And we got on an elevator together. And he was like, when you get on an elevator, you don't try to clock if you're the only black person on the elevator, right? Because if you are the only black person on the elevator, you have to act differently. So you have to try to put everybody at ease. Maybe I make a joke, maybe I
Hmm.
smile, and that's it. It doesn't change my life to know that, but I have to every time I get into an elevator now that he said that, it occurs to me I don't think about the fact that I'm getting on this elevator because I'm a white dude. I don't have to worry about that. So again, scenarios where other people feel uncomfortable or worried that you don't feel uncomfortable or worried about, that's just a little bit of privilege. And I think being aware of it makes the world just a little bit nicer for other people. That's all.
I think social intelligence and being able to put yourself in someone's shoes, that's important.
Right.
I think when it gets divided into like either sexuality or race or gender or whatever, I think that's where people become more defensive about it. If I had to guess,
Right.
where
Well, I
it's
mean,
like,
but that's you say you got to live in the world. The world defines people like that.
right,
The big joke is, like, as a liberal male, and you go like, who just was here? George. What does George look like? And you don't want to say the black guy. But you say the black guy there because that's how people see the world. Everybody says, I don't see race, I don't see gender. You do. The world sees race, the world sees gender, the world sees sexuality. So to be realistic about that and say, all right, if this is the way the world defines things, how can I make it easier on these people? I don't feel like that's a bad thing. I think that generally that
it's
helps.
good to be understanding of it for
Yeah.
sure. It's I guess I guess what happens to people is when they try to get other people to live as they live, in that people get the sense of being controlled or something. And like people are just automatically going to resent that, even if they're right.
Right.
It's like you got to let people come to it on their own a little bit, and that decision will stick. But when it's other people trying to like push it, then
Right.
there's automatically usually going to be a hand up and says, "Stop that! Stop telling
Yeah.
me what to do." And that's just kind of human nature a little bit.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that getting angry with people for putting their hand up a little bit doesn't make them more willing to take the hand down. But I think about like gay people that want to that say like have the picture of their husband. If a gay guy has a picture of their husband up, and then other people are like, "Why are you pushing your homosexuality down my throat?" And you go like, that's again, you want to talk about privilege. You would never think twice about having a picture of your wife up, and no one else would, right? No one would be upset if I had a picture of my wife at my desk. But if it's my husband, now people are upset about that. The people who are against it have now made it the issue. It's not the person who put it up. And think about what that person had to go through in their mind to go like, if I put this up, how much of an issue is it going to be? How much are they going to push back? How much are they going to yell at me? Am I going to get fired for putting this up? And that's privilege, right? I don't have to think about that. They do. And then they're accused of pushing it down other people's throats. And why do you have an agenda here? And it's like, no, I just like this picture that I took at Disney World. Can I please just be
It was
left
like the
alone?
teacher thing, right? But we
Yeah.
were growing up. I don't think I remember anyone really having like pictures of their husbands or children on their desk at all. Like it just
Right.
wasn't a thing.
Well, we didn't have
Whoever it
desks.
was,
Right. Yeah. We didn't
it was
have like,
just no one did it.
right. But if you went, generally speaking, I think it's that thing of like, if you feel like somebody else is pushing themselves and their ideology onto you, I would say, is that possible that it's because you are so centered on your own ideology as being I'll say, the first time I went to a friend's house, I didn't eat eggs growing up. I did not eat eggs. I still do not eat eggs. Eggs are disgusting. Nobody should
Like
eat
my little
eggs.
brother.
Yeah, there are people that are anti-egg. I am anti-egg. My father did not think that was healthy. He thought you needed egg protein to get stronger. That's what he thought. So he convinced me as a kid that milkshakes had raw eggs in them. And he would put 2 raw eggs in all the milkshakes that he made for me. So I was drinking Rocky style milkshakes for the
Clever.
first 7 years of my life because I couldn't taste the egg. And I knew you put like eggs in cake. So it was all right. So like for me, I remember the first time I went to a friend's house and they were like, "You want to make a milkshake?" I was like, "I do. Where are your eggs?" And they said, "What?" And I was like, "No, as you know, all milkshakes contain eggs." And they were like, "They do not, Jay. I don't know what you're talking about." We got into an argument. And it was the first time I realized that my reality, number one, my dad was lying to me. But number two, that my reality, like was centered on my experience, and that other people's realities are centered on far different experiences, even so far as whether or not there are eggs in milkshakes.
Yeah.
And I do think that if you live in a very heteronormative society where 99% of the people are just like you, and the other people are either closeted or afraid to talk about it, the second you see something outside of that perspective, you're like, "Why are these people trying to change my whole life?" And it's like, they're not. They're just trying to live their lives. And I think it's okay for them to live their lives, and maybe to take a moment to stop and go, is this because I've only ever lived and seen things one way, and has it changed some since then? And can I change with that time? I think that's okay to do.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to be resistant to change, is I
They
think
are.
what we're seeing. And we're getting close to, say, the Republican states of America and the Democrat states of America. And we
Yeah.
pretty much are that right now, excluding about 5 or 6 states. And
Yeah.
so that's the division. The division is going to be along political lines and like mentally how people see the world. Like, what is their viewpoint? And that's what we're seeing. But back to the men thing, though, it's like, I do think there's some emphasis. There should be some emphasis on masculinity. I feel like the left doesn't like polarity too much. They want to like make it so that people are more similar. But just overall, and like in the sexual world, there is going to be polarity, or usually there will be, and that causes sexual attraction. But I think where would someone who wants to learn like masculinity stuff, where do they go? If not on the right, like a Andrew Tate or whomever else, where do they go?
Well, so I would say the thing about masculinity that's interesting is that masculinity is an ever shifting concept, right? If
Sure.
I were a masculine, like if you go back just 100 years, uh, pink was considered the most masculine color, and blue was considered a feminine color. So if you were to dress a baby, you would dress a baby. Your male baby's in pink, and your female baby's in blue. It's a change. If you go back 400 years, the tightest tights you could wear showing off your calves as a dude was considered the height of masculinity. Look at my hot calves and my big package in my tight tights, Shakespeare time, right? So this idea of what is masculine is an ever shifting concept, right? Masculinity at some point was Tom Selleck with his mustache and his hairy chest, and at some point it was Justin Bieber with his little goofy haircut. Girls are going to like different things at different times, and the concept of masculine, like the idea that John Cena, who was on the Oscars 2 nights ago, who by the way looked great, completely ripped, also waxed to within an inch of his life, right?
Sure.
I mean, to show off those muscles, you're going to have to wax and put some cocoa butter on so everybody
Something.
can see him. And the idea, if I were to say to the average dude, like, you got to go wax, they're going to say that's feminine. But nobody would say what John Cena did was feminine, right? They would go like, he looks fantastic up there, right? So this idea, it's an evolving concept in our mind. And I think that where we get into problems isn't so much that there's a masculine and a feminine, but that we think that the masculine and feminine are contained in never changing tablets. Like,
Right.
this is what it is to be masculine, this is what it is to be feminine. Or that if someone is masculine in some cases and feminine in others, that there's a problem there. I think that when you try to force people into a box, whatever that box might be, it's bad for the person. You let them go with wherever they want to go. Like think about it. We grew up, I mean, probably more me than you, but we're only a few years apart, that men didn't talk about their problems, right? My grandfather, I don't even think they would drink heavily and they would die in wars. That was what they did.
Right.
That was their generation. And I don't think anybody thinks that's a good thing, right? But for the longest time, these guys were so held by their masculine standards, whatever that was. They were afraid to talk about something and make their lives better by talking about it because they were afraid of looking unmasculine. And I think if you tell little kids, hey, this is masculine and this is feminine, and you're a girl if you do this and you're a boy if you do that, all you're going to do is make them sad. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, you're going to give them a set of unrealistic goals. I mean, why can't we just say that, like, just be alive, and then however you shake it out. Like, if you want to grow a beard, cool. If you want to wax your chest like John Cena, also cool. If you want to lift weights, if you want to sing, if you want to do whatever, just go live your life and let masculine and feminine norms sort of change around you rather than trying to change yourself to what those norms are.
I think we see a lot of that today, but you reminded me of something when you were talking. So
Yeah.
Travis Kelce,
Mm-hmm.
over the last month, for example, he gave a good demonstration of I think, what a little bit of the problem is. So on Super Bowl Sunday, he's yelling in Andy Reid's face.
Right.
And on that day, he's Mr. Toxic Masculinity. How dare you do that? And I did think on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least harmful, 10 being horrible, that's like maybe a 2 or a 3.
Right.
It was maybe a little over the line, but not too terrible. It's a Super Bowl.
Right.
And he was getting a lot of grief for it. And then just the other day, I guess when Jason Kelce was retiring, they showed a picture of Travis Kelce crying.
Right.
And then there was all these tweets of, oh, people should study Mr. and Mrs. Kelce to see how they made their children so emotionally available.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, hey, guys, him yelling at Andy Reid is just as emotionally available as the crying, but yet it's only the crying that seems to get rewarded. Like, they want to say, oh, that's great, you cried, but how about the anger? How about the passion? What's the correct way to let that out?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably a reason for that. And that reason is, how many holes have there been punched in a wall in your childhood home?
Well, and some people get scared of it, right? People get scared of male anger. But there's many people who can be angry that aren't going to beat their spouse or even punch holes in the wall, like all the white people memes. Like, how do you know you dated a white man and all the holes in the drywall, right?
Right.
A joke like that.
Yeah, but again, going back to that issue that we spoke about earlier, not all men are going to do that, but the people who are going to do that are generally men, right?
Sure.
The turning anger into violence is something that men do more often, most often, right? So
Because
I think
women's is different. Women will
right,
do things in different ways.
right, but the way they do it does not involve hitting, generally speaking, right? I mean, if we're just playing the odds,
It's
if
just
you
not as
hurt
powerful, even if they do.
right. And there's a responsibility with that power. You know, if you are Jason Kelsey, you're 6'5" and you're built out of muscle. And, you know, maybe yelling at Andy Reid like that, who's also a very big guy, you know, in the height of the passion of the Super Bowl, men among men, maybe that's not an issue. But if you're looking for red flags, you know, if you're saying like, you know, how do you handle when things get rough? Screaming in someone's face might look like a red flag. And I think the history of humanity up to the point where Travis Kelsey did that has borne out that you
Well,
look, you know,
you think you can differentiate between how you treat other men versus how you might treat the woman in your life. So how he might treat Taylor Swift, for example. Like maybe he'll
absolutely.
let that out with other men. And to me, I think it's more acceptable to let it out with other men. I'm all for other men talking with each other,
Right.
helping each other. In fact, I would tell guys to go to other men with their problems in
Mhm.
most cases before you talk to women about it. So it's like that's what I would say because a woman doesn't have male experience.
Right.
Like she
And, you
doesn't
know,
know what it's like being a man.
you get the flattening effect of the internet in a situation like that, where you have a whole bunch of people trying to make hay out of something that they don't know the ins and outs of. So I think that's problematic. I'm saying that generally speaking, though, if I see, you know, if my daughter was dating a dude who bumped his coach and was yelling at his coach, I wouldn't say break up with him, but I might say that's a little red flaggy to me. It's a little red flaggy because of all the you know 50 odd people on the team, he's the only one screaming at his coach right there. It's a little red flag. So I don't blame people for looking at a display of anger as a red flag. I don't think it's obviously it's not a let's cut things off kind of thing. But I do think again, as a man, you know, I think about, you know, the fact that I have size and weight, and you know, I don't want my kids to ever see me punch a wall. I've wanted to punch many walls, you know,
Right.
and there is that, you know, physical expressions of anger come naturally to men, but being able to stop those physical expressions of anger and say what's a more constructive way of doing this is important for us to learn. So I think you know, to not, I'm not criticizing Travis Kelsey here. I'm saying I can understand where people would come from to say crying, oh, that's nice, that's not toxic. Yelling and hitting your coach or bumping into him is a little toxic. I think that's fair. I do.
I just think they're both emotions.
Hmm.
And as long as you're not like abusive with the emotions physically or whatever, it's like, can you yell
Right.
without being considered abusive? Some
You,
people would say no, maybe.
you know, it's hard to say. I do think context is important there, but like you know, we've all known guys that maybe haven't raised a fist, but will yell and scream about something.
Yeah,
And, you know, I've done a lot of comedy. I've seen a lot of drunks get removed
sure.
and yell and scream as they're being removed. And, you know, I don't necessarily, it doesn't bother me, but I can see the audience sort of, you know, kind of get like, all right, well, what's coming, right? What's coming next? And as my dad used to say, nothing good happens at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Like if you're out with your friends at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's generally not speaking for good reason. I think that if you're yelling at somebody, like you are yelling bare teeth, you look like a gorilla ready to pounce, yelling. It's not a good look and it's not a helpful look. And you know, I do think saying, "Hey, your emotion here is valid. Can you go take a lap and come back when you're not screaming?" is better for everybody.
Sure. I'm a big fan of taking a break from an
Hmm.
emotional conversation. I
Taking
think
a
that's
lap.
one of the best things people can do.
Take a
Although
lap.
sometimes people want to rope them back in and say, no, you can't leave. We got to take care of this now. But
Hmm.
it's like, no, like let them go. If someone is getting emotional and they think whatever, why
Right.
not let them go is what I
Uh,
say.
effective communication How
Right.
can you get your point across? And yelling is generally never going to get your point across in a way that people listen.
So I guess what I see, like with the Travis Kelsey thing, is I guess I get annoyed that only one side is really validated. It's always like the softer emotions. But how about competitiveness or
Mhm.
like really passion? People have a really hard time, it seems, congratulating men on that. They'll do that to women. They'll say to women, "Oh, it's great when you're this. It's great when you're this." But with the men, people don't really like it, and probably for some of the reasons you said. But I think there's going to be men that are going to be their emotions when they look toxic might scare some people,
Mhm.
right? And it's just not going to be an equivalent. Like women don't have any equivalent for the
Right.
very most part. And it's the same thing with like a sexual assault thing. Like women, generally speaking, don't do that. It's
Mm-mm.
not impossible, but it's very rare. And what I've noticed in the society today is when there is no female equivalent of something, the other side gets pounced on really hard. So, like the things that men do specifically, those are the things that get pounced on the most
Right. Well,
because,
but as a man though, and as a father of a son, I think it's the solution there is to say, hey, look at the world. Okay, look at this is how you're going to be viewed, because if you are alone with someone and there is any question at all whether or not they want to be there, even if she goes at the end of a long conversation, okay, maybe I am ready for this. The solution isn't to change society in that scenario. The solution is walk away and make sure that she's ready for whatever it is that you want to do, so that there's no whiff of any persuasion. You don't want to be in a scenario where you are persuading somebody to do something that they don't want to do. I think educating men, there is no female equivalent. You don't have to worry about them doing this to you. So that means you should be extra aware of your possibility of hurting them by your actions, because they don't see the world that way you do. So stop doing that.
I see.
You know what I mean? Like you said that men don't get necessarily applauded for their competitiveness. They're in the Super Bowl. Travis Kelsey has $50 million of endorsements. He's
Right.
being applauded financially and with renown for his competitiveness. It's that moment of toxicity creates a little bit of a red flag, but like I think men are rewarded for doing stuff that that as Don Draper once said, that's what the money's for. So he's
Right.
doing all right. So
Well,
yeah.
some say the guys that are like that, they get rewarded in private, is what happens. Like they're not the ones that are going to be the public accolade besides
Right.
being on the sports team. They'll
Right.
get rewards from, say, women behind closed doors. Other kinds of people will get rewards in public. Now, the other thing you're making me think about there was also is that what was it? Something about not Taylor Swift. Oh, about sports in general, though. So, are you a big Philadelphia sports fan?
I am. I'm not as much as I used to be, only because I have kids and they are not interested in sports. So I watch as much as I can. My daughter coming up, my 8-year-old, really loves the Phillies and the Eagles. But my
Ah,
son is a theater kid. He does not care for sports all that much. And my daughter is a big book nerd, so she doesn't care either. But my youngest really likes it. And I'm
okay.
always been a big fan. Yes.
Well, I'm sure you had to talk a little bit sports with Rhea and Angelo
Yeah.
occasionally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's we just had a big conversation about Jason Kelsey leaving. So yeah.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I really respect, Jason Kelsey,
Hmm.
because he seems like he's got all the sides going for him, right? He's a
Hmm.
good man to probably aspire to be like.
Hmm.
Another one that's like that, James Sexton. I don't know if you know who that is,
No,
but he's
no.
a popular divorce lawyer right now on YouTube. He was just on Lex Friedman. He
Oh
was
no,
on
I don't know
Soft
him.
White Underbelly. But what he does, he combines both sides that I don't see combined very often. He's got masculinity on one hand with passion and
Hmm.
drive and charisma, but he's also in touch with emotions too. And he's like, he owns those and he's
Right.
owning the loving part. So, what I see in the world is in like the divided sphere of like Democrats are one way,
Hmm.
Republicans are another way, you don't see much of that middle ground that James
Right.
Sexton seems to have, where he's like, yeah, he's got the masculine elements, like drive and passion, but he also owns the loving side too. Sort
Right.
of like the father from the Adams family, a little bit. I forget his name.
Gomez.
Like Gomez.
Yeah.
A man like Gomez to me is a good combination of the two. And I
I'm a,
think it's rare. It's rare to see that right now.
yeah, I'm a man like Cousin It. I am very hairy. So
Me
very
too.
cousin.
You, me, and Robin Williams.
That's right. I say I would do a sexy photo on a bearskin rug, but you wouldn't be able to see anything but my head. But
Oof.
yeah,
Like a
no,
Chewbacca.
yeah, and don't take me for someone as saying that there's problems with masculinity. I think that the aspects of masculinity that are positive are great. The idea as a man, I want to earn money for my family. I want to take care of them. I want to protect them. I mean, these are drives that I think are instinctual and primal. Where I have an issue is, you know, elevating toxicity or saying toxicity should be forgotten about because it's just boys being boys. I think you can do better than that. That's the only thing I say, that if you don't have to punch the wall. It's not, if you want to punch the wall, it's okay. But if you do punch the wall, you failed. And to just go, well, that's how men show their emotion, I think is giving them an out that they don't need. Like, be better. You can do better than that,
I think
fellas.
most people can get behind that part of it. I guess it just seems like it goes further than that. Like you have a moderate take on that. And I guess
Right.
other people don't, though. Other people go much further than what you just said. And I think the people who go much further kind of make it hard for everyone because
Right.
it makes people defensive and whatever.
And I would say that it's, in a lot of ways, the people who go further than that are sometimes it's a stance that social media requires, where
Yeah,
you're all
sure.
for one thing or all for another. Just like most Trump fans that attack me online, I know if they met me in person would not be that rude and awful and tell me that I'm a liberal cuck who deserves to die. I know they wouldn't, because I meet them all the time when I do stand up, and they get along because in person people are more forgiving of one another and more understanding.
Some of
I
them. I've met
Yeah,
some Trumpers out in Pennsylvania. They're pretty brass in person, too.
yeah, Trumpers are a different kind, but yeah,
I've heard some wild stuff in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, let me tell you.
right. But I think even like the people who are the furthest left and the furthest of feminists, and they live in the real world too, and they understand that there are differences that they accept in their husband. I'm sure there are feminists who are married who understand that their husbands are X, Y, and Z. They would like them to be a little bit more this way or that way, but they understand that there's challenges there.
Right.
I think that the stances on social media are sometimes extreme, but that doesn't mean that as dudes we can't tell other dudes to try to be better about how they interact with people. And
Here's the
that's
question for you.
yeah.
Magic wand for Jay Black.
Hmm.
If you have a magic wand, you can change a couple things. What would you change to make the world a little bit different? Or what would you see in like the social world or the
Right.
political world? What would you change?
Right. Hold on just 1 second. Hey, Alexa, stop. Sorry. The first thing I would do is have my Alexa not make a noise while I'm doing an interview. I think empathy. I would increase everybody's social antenna just a little bit, and just let them understand that 99% of the time human beings are just human beings doing their best, and that they're all sort of the hero of their own stories, and that in any given scenario they're not the villain that you think they are, and that if you can understand where they're coming from, you can come out the other side a little bit more understanding. So if I was, one thing I would do, increase empathy. Number two thing I would do, $85 trillion for me. So those two things I think would make the
There you
world a
go.
better place. But I just think human beings, especially post-pandemic, what I've seen post-pandemic is a drop in empathy. And I don't know if it's because we're all dealing with some form of long COVID that are making us nuts, or if it's because we're so bottled up for so long we feel like things are owed to us. But I'll go to my doctor's office and I'll see a sign that says the nurses are trying their best, please don't yell at them. And I'll say, well,
Hmm.
what is this about? And they were like, well, we've been dealing with a lot of customers yelling at us lately. And I'm like, but why? Why would you be yelling at a nurse at your doctor's office? They're like, I don't know, just since the pandemic people have seemed testy. I think that if we can just make people understand that we have far more in common than we don't, and that we're all most people are just doing their best, we would be better people.
I mean, I think social media has caused people to dehumanize others a little
Mhm.
bit. When you just see people as a name on a screen,
Yeah,
it's easier to kind of treat them like they're not a person. It's
absolutely.
easier to not see the humanity. And like you said, in person, a lot of things will usually be different. Not always, but often they'll at least give people a little more of the benefit of the doubt. They won't be as rude, they won't be as ignorant,
Hmm.
because there's social repercussions in person that are just not there
A bunch of
online.
times when people tell me I'm an idiot who should die on Twitter, I'll retweet it with my schedule and say MAGAs are welcome to my show. You just have to pay full
What do they get
price.
mad at you about?
I, I listen. I'm a little stinker. When I get online, I like to reply to Republicans, or make funny jokes about what's going on
Aha.
in the social, in the political world, and they don't like that, and they'll get mad at me. And I always reply and just really, come to my show. My wife gets so nervous about that, and she's like, "You're going to get murdered one of these days," and I'm like, "Probably not." Number one, I have three
Yeah.
kids. I'm willing to die. I'm happy to die. I'm tired. But number two, I don't believe honestly that most people. I mean, there's nuts out there, but most people, when they look you in the eyes, they go, "All right, you're all right, all right." It's just because,
Most people can get to that
yeah.
eventually, right? It's
So I
very
said,
rare where it's like true hatred
mhm,
down to the bone. You
yeah,
might really disagree with somebody, but mostly you can get to that. Okay, we might
yeah.
agree to disagree.
Just come out and see my show. You'll be fine. That's what I say.
And you have almost 50,000 Twitter followers now, or is it more than that now?
I just crossed 50,000. Thank you. I'm at 50.1. Yeah, it's a shame that Elon is destroying Twitter from the inside out. This would have meant a lot more 5 years ago. But
Well, you
it's
might get paid from Twitter now too. You might,
I
if you do
I
the
do.
monetization.
I am monetized, and I will say I can reveal that with my 50,000 followers and my 10 million engagements per month, I'm making somewhere in the vicinity of $30 a month. So
Woo!
yeah, I guess I'm going to need to get that up to 200 million engagements to start making any kind of real money. But
I'll tell you, Facebook's pretty similar.
yeah,
Facebook's not much better than that.
yeah,
It is better, but not that much better. I'll put
yeah.
it that way.
It's a lot, and I don't do a good job of engagement farming like a lot of people do, because I don't care. My friends who are really good at it will be like, say, what did you think of Kate Britt's reaction to the State of the Union? Reply with a GIF, and you'll get a bunch of engagement. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I
Is
don't
that
want
the
to see
senator? The senator that
the
did that?
senator who did
Yeah,
and I'm very sad about what's
yeah.
happened, like that bad junior high acting that she did. But like, I don't engagement farm like I should. I just like, I like interacting with the people that I interact with, and I have trouble going beyond that. So
Well, even you and I doing what we do,
yeah.
we see the power that an algorithm has
Hmm.
and what kinds of things the algorithm promotes. And to me, it's a preview of what AI is going to be like as it takes over more and more things.
Right.
Right now, on like YouTube, for example, things that are extreme, that's what gets pushed. That's what gets the eyeballs on them. And so it's going to be financially rewarded
Right.
when they do that. When they do, doesn't matter if it's good for the country, doesn't matter if it's good for anybody, they're going to get fiscally rewarded. And it
And
always, like Beef Vendetta, he says, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into the mirror.
right.
We're all clicking. If they weren't getting clicked on, it would go away.
And it's interesting because the algorithm is sort of just this machine that monetizes people's wants.
Yeah.
And the truly innovative, the truly interesting are things that people that they don't know that they want it. I always think of Henry Ford. They said if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster
Yeah.
horse, because they couldn't conceive of a machine that could be better than a horse. So I do worry about that. But like I said, if it makes me rich, I'm happy for it. That's,
Well, and that's what I say about social media too.
yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I also know I wouldn't be in the spot I'm in without it.
Right.
So it's like a necessary evil in a way. And some of
Hmm.
it is, how do we choose to use it? How do we choose to interact with it? We can
Right.
feed the good part, or we can feed the not so good part. a lot of that does depend. But I do think there is something about just social media in general and interacting with screens so much.
Right.
This is a very new variable where, like you mentioned before, even back in the caveman days, they would say you're looking at the fire too long. But this is an absolutely different variable that has never been there. And I'm curious to see how it will display itself
Well,
down the line.
it's an abstraction of human desire in a way that doesn't fulfill that desire correctly. And it's what I used to tell my kids about video games, which is I love video games, but video games are achievement masturbation, right? They make you feel like you are doing something, but you're not doing anything.
Right.
Right. So they just give you the little dopamine hits of the goals that you're achieving, which is, oh, you killed 5 of 10. Here's a silver medal. If you kill 8 of 10, you get a gold medal. And that part of you that wants to achieve things, it's like, well, I got to get the 8 of 10. Now I got to go back and do that. And at the end of the day, you've achieved literally nothing, but you feel like you've maybe achieved a lot. And that I see this with a lot of young men. Every time I read about like a wife who is writing in for advice because her husband got laid off, video games are mentioned in the second sentence at least,
Really?
which is
Huh?
all he does is play video games all day long. And I'm like, of course, because he lost at work, but he can win at the video game. And what he doesn't realize is that this thing that he's doing, that to complete these goals and to feel like he's achieving something, is the exact worst thing that he could do. Like, he would be better off literally doing anything in the real world other than these pretend games. I think that to apply that to social media, we want to have people in our lives. We want to feel loved. We want to feel connected with people. And these parasocial relationships that we are creating on the phone are probably not going to give us the fulfillment that we want, but it'll go through the motions of that fulfillment.
Right.
The same way you pretend like you achieve a goal in Call of Duty, you pretend like you have a relationship with somebody online. It's not the exact same thing. You need to have human connection.
Right.
So I'm not necessarily worried about social media, but I am worried that the level of connection and empathy that we have is not what it should be.
I would say social media, like they say, is the fast food of social interaction.
Mhm.
It fills you up, but it doesn't give you any essential nutrients. That's what social media basically does.
Right.
And unless you're going to be like Destiny or some sort of streamer
Mm-hmm.
that's going to go on Kick or Twitch, those people do make it work. Like, I like listening to Destiny. I don't know if you know who that is.
I do. I've especially of late, because he's been debating people. I keep seeing his.
So
debates.
he's in line. I'm moderate like he is in a way, but he's considered a conservative clown to some people on the left.
Right.
Even though he's not conservative, but he's just further right than them.
I just think about those guys though. I got to imagine, like, who's the other one? Is it Hassan?
There's
Is that
Hassan Piker,
Yeah.
Ethan.
I hear about him. I don't follow any of those guys, but I just feel like it has to be exhausting. Could you imagine talking like for 4 hours a day?
That's all he does.
While chat scrolls by at 10,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I put a bullet in my head. My God, I couldn't.
Well,
do that.
he's turned video game playing into his career. And
No, listen, I feel those guys, congratulations to them. I'm just saying, me personally, I would jump out of a window into a speeding car before I did that. I couldn't.
and most people can't do that, right? 99% of the people, they're not going to be able to do that. Social media, I think, is similar in a way where you're getting like the dopamine hits and whatever. The difference is, I think with social media, you can translate it to the real world a little easier.
Right.
Like, there are people who make a career on their social media, many more than then create a career on video games.
Right.
So it's similar though. It's similar.
Well, especially like somebody like me who has like a live show component where I'm just trying to get people to come out to my shows, via videos or tweets or whatever. That's helpful to me to use social media for that. But yeah. And then you meet real people and you go, oh, you're nice in person, which is nice.
Have you ever thought about doing like a podcast that wasn't about TV shows, like more like a political show plus some comedy?
I could see doing that. I would say that the amount of effort that I'm putting in with the podcast that I do with Angelo is like so great that like I'm trying to my best for a work-life balance. I have kids that they're like, I do a lot of traveling. So when I'm home, I like to try to be as home as possible. But I could see that down the line, especially, we have some things working on the podcast now that's going to make it bigger.
Mm.
And if I could use that platform to sort of jump off and, throw in a little politics, I could see doing that. The thing I worry about though, is that, when you do a tweet, you have at least some reflection on the ability to edit the tweet and try to get it exactly right. I do feel like if I was talking politics, an hour a day, every day, I would say something I didn't mean or didn't mean to be
Eventually.
taken in a way. And that would upset me. There's nothing that makes me more upset than saying something imprecise. And I'm sure I've done it over the course of the last 2 hours with you, where it can be taken several different ways. And if somebody gets offended at it, I would feel the need, and I would have to do everything in my power not to do it, to call the person who's offended and go, let me explain to you what I meant by that, because I really mean to offend you. And I would have to go through it. And it's too much anxiety and pressure for me. I would explode. I can't.
Well, a recorded podcast might take care of some of that, where you record it and
Yeah,
then you
it's
go
true.
back into it later and
Yeah.
you can edit out things. Another guy I really like, Dan Carlin. I don't know if you know
Oh
who
yeah,
that is.
hardcore history. I know.
That's
Dan
right.
Carlin.
He
Yeah.
had a Common Sense podcast that I used to really love,
Mhm.
but he stopped doing it. But his ideas politically were very similar to mine as well, where he used to be a conservative. And then I think over time, he became more moderate.
Right.
And he's got views of both. But I think people like him, invaluable, and honestly, one of the most important things, people that can just talk about some of this stuff
Mhm.
without losing their minds and
Right.
being able to communicate it in a way that people, maybe even if they don't agree, they can still listen. To me, that's probably one of the most important things the country needs right now, outside of laughter, because that's
Yeah.
always going to be important too.
And I'd like to do both, ladies and gentlemen, if I
Oh
could.
yeah,
So
I mean,
maybe
it's got to
one
be
day
fun
I'll.
working with Angelo and Rhea, though.
Yes. I'm sorry. Say that one. What did you say?
So it's
What's it
got to
like?
be fun working with
Oh, it's
Angelo.
great. Well, it's both of them are like radio gods. Like they know how to talk in such
Right.
a way as to be interesting, but also how to get out of each other's way. And our podcast is only a half hour. And I originally had it designed to be one of these rambling, like I'm like, Angelo, we have infinite time.
Right.
If we want to talk for 45 minutes about the latest episode of a show, we can do that. And he was like, no, people will get bored. We're going to do it. And he taught me how to make these punchy segments in 4 to 5 minute chunks.
I see.
And it's just interesting to see like the feedback that we get from people. I don't think that the pendulum is swinging back towards like, shorter content, but I do get people going, I like it because it moves so fast. And it's like, well, that's Angelo. That's somebody who knows how to drive the train of a conversation in a way that, it moves very quickly and doesn't get bogged down. I love the long form format, but seeing somebody who did terrestrial radio for 30 years and the experience that he has just been invaluable.
I know I could offer you a suggestion if you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
I would say, and this is what it has taught me, when you cut things down to the 60-second to 90-second clips, whatever they are, if you cut up what you do and put them into 60 to 90-second segments and upload them to YouTube, TikTok, Facebook Reels, and Instagram Reels, that is how you grow right now.
That's how
because
people
those are
find
the
you.
right, and that's what propels the growth on YouTube the most, because the shorts algorithm is a little different than the longer form algorithm. But the shorts are like an advertisement for your channel. So
Gotcha.
like any episodes you have, you clip it up, and those 4 to 5 minute things, maybe you boil that down to like 60 seconds, get a nice little 60-second hit, boom.
Right.
That's how people find it.
They're talking about it. Yeah, it's part of what we're hoping to grow with is stuff like that. So I think
I'll do that with this too. Like I'll download this to StreamYard, and then I'll cut it all up, things that might be interesting, and put it up there.
So are we streaming now to people?
Yeah.
Or is this, are we getting reaction? Can we see real-time reaction from people?
There could be, but there hasn't really. People watch these like as they can. Sometimes people come on board, and then some people don't. Some people comment a lot. Some people comment little. But what happens, I usually get the most engagement when I turn it into clips.
Gotcha.
And then on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, anything I choose from this whole thing could turn into thousands and thousands. It just depends. hundreds of thousands.
We got a lot to choose from. Absolutely.
Well, all
That's
sorts.
cool.
We can talk about Travis Kelce and the political stuff and
Yeah.
the comedic stuff. There's so much to choose from.
I'm looking forward to it, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And you reminded me, the other thing, Mark Normand, the other thing he was saying that you reminded me of too, was how women, he said, are entitled to the morning. He goes, oh, I did all this work to get with you, and then you feel entitled to my morning? He's like, you should earn it. I had to earn it to get here. You should earn me staying around for the morning. So he'll say these like controversial things that
Right.
it just puts it in a different kind of perspective that people don't normally see it.
I think that's what good comics do. Absolutely.
And he's good at that.
Yes.
So anything else you wanted to share here, Mr. Black?
No, just if you're on YouTube right now and you want to find my channel, Hello Jay Black is where I'm at. But if you go to jayblack.tv, JAYBLECK.TV, that's where all my socials are. If you want the political stuff, come to Twitter. If you want the funny haha stuff, go everywhere else, because I don't put the political stuff usually on the other places, because I like to be a little stinker on Twitter. So find me. If you want little stinker Jay, go to Twitter. Otherwise, jayblack.tv has everything else. So
yeah, and we'll put all these links in the description there too. So we'll have your Instagram link in there, the YouTube link, the podcast link, all of it. All of it.
I'd appreciate that, Jared. And this has been so nice catching up with you. This is great. I'm very happy with the man you've turned into. And I like to think that my time as your teacher is 80% of it. So 90%. Good to know that 90% of this came from me. But if you are one of the Shawnee kids that are watching, or you're a Seneca kid that found this, come find me online. Let's send me a message. Let's chat. I love catching up with you guys, and it means a lot that I got to talk to you.
And you're definitely invited to that Shawnee reunion, April 20th, I think it is, at Otts in Medford.
Otts in Medford. I'm gonna have to lose weight. I want to look good for that.
Now, granted, I wasn't invited. They invited you, not me.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Jared.
All right, my man. Thanks for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
All right. Boom.